Greetings, my Artsy AF friends, and welcome to another episode of the Artsy AF podcast. Thanks for being here. As always, I'm Andrew Norris, your host. This week we have the amazing Jessica Perlstein. Jessica's a painter living in San Francisco, and in this episode we dive into her backstory. All the way from having creative parents as a child, being pushed towards making art, to going to art school, and then finding some independent mentors afterwards while delving into the live painting and festival art community. And she even talks about a 3-year break she takes from painting only to emerge with a new and exciting style, completely changing things up. And I just really respect artists who can do that. And Jessica has pulled it off really well. So be sure to check out her work. You can find her at Jessica Perlstein on Instagram and jessicaperlsteinart.com. Go check it out. And this week we have 2 new Patreon subscribers. Big shouts to Charlie Poteski. He is making some cool art. Went and checked that out the other day. Very cool, man. Keep up the good work. You can find him at Charlie Poteski. If you're wondering how to spell that, look in the description. I have a link there. Go check him out on Instagram. And huge shouts to Tom Nance. Thank you, my friend, for supporting the podcast. You and Precious also invited about 300 people to the group on Facebook, which reminds me, go check it out. It's called Artsy AF Pod Squad. It's just a little community group kind of thing, and we are growing. The squadrahedron is growing. So thank you, Tom, and you can find him at the Fribrarian on SoundCloud. I've got a link down there in the description as well, down there in the description. So go on and check it out. Let's go ahead and get right into the show here. Here is Jessica Perlstein.
Are you going to ask me about my diet?
Well, sometimes I do, sometimes there's like questions about routine and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But Jessica Perlstein, welcome to RTAF.
Yay, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited that we got to do this. Like, you're in town till Sunday. You're up here at Randall Morgan's house, and
yeah,
we're just shimmying on up here to make this happen.
Yeah. I just needed to get out of my house. I live in the fog belt of San Francisco, and I love my neighborhood. It's really close to the beach. I can just bike to the beach, and it's chill. It's not in the middle of the city, so it's a house, and my studio's in the living room with like all these big windows that cover the whole wall. So I love it, but when it's summertime, it's foggy the whole time.
Really?
Every day for 3 months.
Like all throughout the day?
All throughout the day.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like what we call fraining. Like thick fog, so thick it feels like rain. You get wet.
So is it cold?
Yeah, it's like 50 degrees all summer.
What?
And everywhere else is super hot. So people like look to me and they're like, you have no idea how good it is, but I love the heat. So I don't know. It just, that kind of weather makes me feel kind of like unmotivated and mopey. So
yeah.
And I was just feeling housebound, which I can be very hermity. So I like it. I like being a homebody, but then sometimes I get like an itch to leave, and so I'll leave, and flights are a little cheaper now. So
yeah, it's good to switch it up too.
Yeah, and I got my eyes set on Colorado. I don't know if it's going to happen, but
really?
I'm kind of
So you're
putting
thinking
my
about moving
feelers out,
Awesome.
Seeing what's next, because I've been in my same place for 13 years, and it's probably time for a change.
Yeah.
So
Sweet. Well, yeah, again, thanks for agreeing to sit down and do this.
Yeah,
this is fun.
hell yeah. This is exciting. My first podcast I've ever interviewed for, so it's
Nice.
pretty cool.
Nice.
And I'm excited to do it with you.
Sweet. Yeah, it's kind of our first time talking, I think, like in depth. I know I've like
Yeah.
passively met you at a festival or two, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's like those can be kind of blurry, right? You know?
Right. Yeah. I have a hard time remembering people at festivals because there's so many people coming in and out.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I definitely know of you and your art. I know you're a painter in the scene, and I'm really happy to get to know you more now.
Yeah, likewise. So usually how I start out is I want to just ask you about your story, how you got into making art, why you do it, all those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I guess we can start as far back as you think is relevant.
Yeah.
Like maybe childhood. Mm-hmm. So is that where you started to make art in the first place?
Yeah, I've been making art since I was little. My family's very creative. I feel very blessed that they've always supported me creatively, and it kind of runs in the family. My dad was a photographer in the 60s for rock bands and
oh really
and jazz bands. So he did really famous photographs of the Grateful Dead and Bob Marley and Led Zeppelin and just like anything you can imagine.
Did he take this? I mean,
not Tool. That's a little later.
Well, so this is the Dead with a Tool shirt on.
Oh.
Shout out Supercilious who made this. But I love both those bands, so I was like,
yeah,
really...
I'm not sure. He has so many hundreds of thousands of photos. I haven't even seen them all. So, but
nice.
I'll just drop his website, Music Images.
Musicimages.com.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, also my mom, as she retired, she started quilting, and she's like painting with fabric basically now. Like, my cousin is a musician, and so there's a lot of art in the family. But I think, my dad's old career was a huge influence on me. Sure. And I feel like I kind of maybe followed his footsteps a bit, going into the festival world later as an artist, not a photographer, but kind of like, I grew up with the Grateful Dead. I'm not a Deadhead, sorry. But I grew up with it, and it was my first concert when I was 6 years old. And so that whole vibe and family is just like infused in my blood,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I've been drawing and making art since I was little. One of the first things that inspired me was horses. I was obsessed with horses, any kind, horses, Pegasus, unicorns, merry-go-rounds, all of it. And, I lived in a suburban neighborhood, so I couldn't have one. I drew them, and I taught myself how to draw basically because of that,
Nice.
Yeah, and then later, my dad had a music archive. Like, he was really into trading bootleg concert tapes, and
right.
And he collected this whole archive of so many shows, and he had a whole library in San Francisco. And I would go there and hang out while he did his thing, and he had this collection of gig posters there, and the one I remember the most was the Jefferson Airplane one, and it was just so cool to me. Just the way it was designed, and so I just deep dived into the gig poster movement of the 60s, like Wes Wilson and Lee Conklin and Stanley Mouse and all that. And that was probably my first, I guess, exposure to psychedelic art.
Nice. Would you count that as like an influence as well?
Definitely. Huge. Yeah, that and tattoos. I've always been into tattoos. I don't have any, but I just prioritize travel. But I've always been into the whole graphic design look. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be a rock poster artist. I actually took screen printing classes in school, and I went to school for illustration. But as I got all the equipment to be a screen printing rock poster artist. And then I discovered G-Clay printing, and that you could just print a painting on canvas and sell it for a lot more. I ended up going in that direction. But
so how old were you when you first started? Like really young, like 6, 7?
Probably like 4 years old. I mean, I was really into coloring books as a kid, and like I was always into rainbows, like the whole rainbow spectrum. I would arrange my crayons in a line, like in front of me, and
it's all good.
I always was playing with the spectrum of color, even as a kid. Even with my toys, I would like organize them in colored arrangements, and so that's always been an influence.
Did you go to school for art at all?
Yeah. Well, when I was younger, I would take kind of summer art classes. My parents were always really supportive, and even to the point of like pushing me to go there when I didn't. Maybe I didn't even want to. Like they would bribe me sometimes. So
really?
It's like they saw something in me that.
What would the prize be?
Oh, like a phone line. You know,
okay,
back in the day when you had different phone lines, they bribed me with my own phone line.
Nice.
And so, you know, I did that. I took all the art classes in high school, like every one you could take. And then I went to art school in college.
Okay, nice. Where'd you go?
I went to the Academy of Art college or university in San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
And I studied illustration. I wanted to be a children's book illustrator, but then when I learned about the industry and how like it's like cutthroat, like so intense, it's like you'd think it would be all nice and sweet, but no.
Really? What's
it's really,
up with
really
it?
competitive, and they have you do a lot of work for not the best in return.
Yeah.
So I just didn't really end up wanting to do it anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted a little more freedom.
This is a side note, but I just started watching this documentary about Bob Ross last night.
Oh, cool.
And apparently, like, I didn't get all the way through it, but the people he was working with, like his business associates, seems like they screwed him out of like a lot of money.
Oh, wow.
And so we got up to the part where like they're about to go into all that, but it was like, I'm a very like regimented person now, and I have a bedtime, so I was like, it's my bedtime.
Yeah.
But that just reminded me of that when you start talking about children's books. You know.
Yeah.
Is it like? Did you make any at all, or?
No, nothing official. No.
Yeah.
I just, it's something I did as a kid. I spent a lot of time alone, and I'm still a very solitary person. I'm an introvert, so. Things I used to do as a kid are, I guess, kind of weird, but I would arrange all my stuffed animals and I would name them and then I would arrange them in alphabetical order, write their list of names, and then I would draw an alphabet book based on them.
Oh, nice.
And like, that's the kind of stuff that I did for fun. So I thought, I should just do this, as an artist for a career.
Right.
Maybe I could do my own and publish it myself, but that's a whole other ball game that is kind of complicated.
Yeah. So you decided against children's books, illustrating children's books. So what made you jump into, let's say, I guess you're still in college at this point. Did you start painting at festivals at that juncture, or?
So my last year of college, I kind of figured out that I don't really like illustration.
Yeah.
And I told the head of the department, like, I don't really like this anymore. And he's like, you got to finish it, like, don't throw it all away, So I finished it, but I felt really lost. That school really pushes hard the whole video game and movie industry. And I never wanted to be an in-office artist. Like working in an office basically as if I was a computer programmer, but I'd be an artist. Like I never wanted that. I always wanted more freedom. I don't know why I didn't just study fine art, if
Leo in the house. So you're kind of at the end of college and you decide that you don't want to study illustration anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if I was going to redo art school or art education for myself, I would have not gone to art school. I would have sought out very specific artists that teach and learn under them, like a bunch of them, and take their workshops, and then also focus like really hard on business.
Oh,
I would have done just as much business school as I did art school, because that's always been my kind of downside.
Yeah, it's hard to learn that on the fly. After you're like, I'm an artist, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I'm a business.
Yeah.
And then that realization precipitates kind of like having to sort of just learn about it from the internet, which is actually a fine place to learn about it. But
yeah. And I can get into that later because I did end up learning that on the internet.
Yeah.
But as far as, how things went after art school, I was having a pretty hard time in my personal life at that point with a variety of things, and I just needed to get out of, San Francisco. I've learned that one way I cope with things is to get up and leave and go travel somewhere. So I was going to do the whole woofing thing. I don't know if you've heard of woofing.
Yeah, it's like the organic farming thing.
Yeah, I guess, you could trade farming work and garden work for a place to stay and food. So I was looking at New Zealand and all these things. And then like super randomly, I like researching interesting things on the internet. So I just typed in shamanism because I thought it'd be interesting to read about, and I was always into plants and plant medicine and herbalism. So I thought, I just feel like reading about this right now. And so the first site that pops up is this travel agency that books trips to Peru to stay at a ayahuasca retreat center.
What year is this?
This
just
is 2006.
Oh, wow.
This is my last year of art school, and I'm ready to, I graduated, and I'm like trying to figure out what to do with my life. I'm heartbroken, and I need to get out and start fresh.
Totally.
So I found this perfect little spot, this ayahuasquero named Don Francisco. He has a place in Iquitos, and he speaks a little bit of English. He's also an artist.
Oh, nice.
And he has a gallery, and he has a little art studio. And so I thought, oh my God, that's perfect. So I just booked the trip.
Nice.
First time traveling alone. Had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't.
Did you know what ayahuasca was?
No, I didn't. I didn't know what it was. I never heard of anybody that did it.
Yeah. So wait, you show up and you're like, "What's up, guys?"
Yeah,
and they're like,
much.
"We're gonna do this ceremony," and you're like, "What?
Well,
Is it like that, or?"
I did a bunch of research on it beforehand because
Okay.
I always make sure I know what I'm getting myself into. I already had been taking psychedelics,
Right,
so
right.
like I know about
Kind of the map of
mushrooms.
the-
I
yeah.
hadn't taken acid at that point, but I know about psychedelics at that point, and set and setting and intention and all of that. So
Sure. Yes.
so I did research and then just showed up, and that experience from that point on just changed the whole course of my life and career and everything.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Okay. Sweet. So you come back to the U.S. and what do you decide to do after that, or did you travel more?
no, I stayed in Peru at that retreat center for 3 weeks, did 2 ceremonies a week, and the lessons I learned basically, because I was so lost, I didn't know what to do with my life and my art. I didn't know where I wanted to go, and the visions that I got from that experience just showed me, things to paint that I thought were really beautiful. And
Nice.
it also taught me just how to follow the direction of my heart and just use it as a compass, right? So like I got that message, but I didn't really understand it fully until maybe 2 years later.
It takes a while to integrate it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So when I got back to the US, maybe about 2 years later, I moved back to San Francisco, and I've always been a follower of Alex Gray, because I was into Tool, and
Yeah.
I saw a Tool concert and blew my mind, and that was my exposure to Alex Gray, like a lot
Nice.
of people.
Yeah.
So he had a Cosm show in San Francisco, and I bought a ticket, and I bought a ticket to the talk he did beforehand, and I went. But little did I know that he'd have all these other artists painting there, and I didn't know that visionary art was a thing. I didn't know that there were other artists that did what he did. And so that party blew me to smithereens. Like, it blew my mind completely. That's where I discovered Carrie Thompson and Zavi and Android, and Ka was doing her dance and
With the feathers.
with her wings. Yeah, and that was just so mesmerizing for me. So after that show, I was like, that's it. This is what I want to do. And
Nice.
I was like so impressed with the caliber of the work that I thought, okay, I have to improve, So
Yeah.
I just focused really hard on getting better as an artist and looking up to those artists as like,
There's some good,
You know,
distanced mentors, I guess you could say.
yeah.
Did you have any closer mentors or anything like that? Anybody like guiding you along the way? Who would you?
So yeah, so 2008 was when I started painting at parties. I just, you know, I went to Burning Man for the first time, came back and just discovered that there's a whole scene in San Francisco. So I started volunteering at parties and I started seeing people painting at those parties. So I thought, oh, I'll do that. So started painting at parties. And then I did that for 2 years. And as I kind of built myself up in that way, I started painting at festivals. And through the festivals, the parties, and his solo art show, I met Andrew Jones.
Oh, nice.
And so, you know, we just kind of like wove past each other every so often, and somehow he came up to me at a party and he said, "Hey, I'm looking for some help as an assistant and I'm wondering if you would like to be that person."
Oh,
and
cool.
It's just like, I did not expect that at all.
Right, yeah.
But of course I said yes, because at that point I was a total fangirl and I'm like, "Oh my God, yes, please." And like, and I didn't know anything about digital art at all.
Right.
I was a total traditionalist. I thought, digital painting, not that into it, but I always loved his art because I think he does a really great job at weaving in between the two realms of traditional and digital.
Well, you can tell he knows how to actually paint if he wanted to like put paint on a canvas.
Yeah,
like,
he's a master for sure, and I still look up to him as that. And I still find him to be a teacher, even though we haven't worked together in 10 years. But at that point, you know, he and I guess, started a mentor-apprentice relationship. And so he had me, like, organizing his, like, crazy warehouse full of shit and driving him to the airport and just, like, helping him out. And then he would teach me art skills, and I would watch him paint his paintings, like, right there.
Nice.
And he would just give me all these nuggets of wisdom all the time. And, yeah, so I learned a lot from him. I feel like I'm still learning a lot from him. It's like all those seeds that were planted, it's like same thing as integrating an ayahuasca journey. It's like the integration comes out later as you keep exploring and keeping exploring, you know? So he was my main, like my first major mentor that I worked with for a good year and a half, I'd say.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I hear that he does have like a lot of wisdom to share.
Oh my God.
He was like a Clubhouse All-Star when we were both on there back in the spring or whatever. And it was just nice to like just hear the guy talk and just go on.
Oh my God, everything that comes out of that guy's mouth is like a nugget of wisdom. You're just like
Yeah, for
wow.
sure.
Yeah.
So okay, after you're done working with Android, have you gone to any festivals at any point?
At that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
are you selling your art there too?
So 2009 was when I started going to festivals for the first time, and I started seeing other artists just like first just painting, and then I saw one artist set up a table with prints. Right.
Like,
and at that time I was working, you know, a minimum wage job at a garden center, and and then I thought, oh, I could do that. So I started selling prints of these like really basic paintings. My first live paintings were really simple, just like black background with a rainbow spectrum of symmetrical line work, basically. And I was selling prints of that, and I discovered that I could make more money doing that than my day job. So
sweet.
At around 2010, I quit my day job, and that was the first time I quit any kind of like normal job and started just doing the whole festival world art hustle.
That's a fun grind.
It was totally fun for me at the time because I'm like, I could get paid to party, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And you get into all these events for free. And but also I just, because of this line of artists I was looking up to, I had something to aspire towards. And so I would work really hard to getting there to that point of you know, being able to show with these people. And eventually it happened. I was working on a piece called Guyanized Goddess. It's the second visionary piece I've ever done. It's completely influenced by that ayahuasca experience. And I was halfway through it, and I took it to a park party in Golden Gate Park. It was some concert party. Just thought, oh, live paint at this party. And I meet a guy named Rio there. And Rio is an interesting character, and he started this event called Alchemize, where he decided to fly out all these visionary artists to Hawaii to open a portal with their painting. And that's how I got to know all the visionary artists really well, and like felt really accepted into their family. So that was really exciting for me.
Yeah.
Then I started getting involved with the Tribe 13 gallery and like helping them out and getting closer to Jen. And yeah, I felt just completely held by this amazing family of artists. It was just, I didn't expect this at all. You know, I didn't set out as a younger person to do this. It just kind of happened as I, you know, what ayahuasca taught me followed my inner compass, right?
Yeah.
So
that's nice to like be that in tune with it, that you like seeing something and it resonates and you're like, that's it. I'm going to follow that. I think that's kind of difficult for a lot of people. Like, I don't know why.
Oh yeah. It's really hard because it's easy to get caught up in your mind and your brain and like life and all the things that come at you. You know, it's not easy at all. I struggle with it all the time. You know, I feel like maybe at that point in my life, there was a purity that came from like being so fresh and new to so many things, and traveling for the first time, and just like having my eyes opened completely for the first time. There's this like, you know, early 20s like purity, like innocent like thing that happens, almost a little naive, you know. That like gets you there, and it's really beautiful, and I love that. I love it when I see it in people, you know.
So did you ever have to go back to another like day job or anything like that?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of day jobs because I think that unless you're really, really, really crushing it, and like you can regularly make as much as you need every month to pay all your bills and then some, and you could save with your art, I think unless that's happening, I think it's worth it to have a day job, because otherwise, at least for me, I felt like I was sacrificing a lot of my creative freedom and doing things I didn't like. And it's like, if I do enough things I don't like art-wise, I stop enjoying making art, and that's never good.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I like day jobs that are, you know, have nothing to do with art, and I can just kind of like turn off from that for a bit and reset. And also I like flexibility, so I'm picky with day jobs.
Oh,
you know?
for sure. Yeah. I did DoorDash for the first time in like over a year, like maybe about a month ago.
Yeah.
And so like it's always nice to have like one of those gig jobs, I guess. Like maybe you're an Uber driver or like.
Yeah, I like gig jobs. I don't do Uber, but some of the other ones I'll do.
Yeah.
I just like being able to set my own schedule. And, you know, ever since I quit my first day job, I haven't been able to look back and say, hey, I'm going to let somebody else dictate my schedule in my life. I can't go back to that anymore.
Exactly,
and if I absolutely had to, then yeah. But it's like, if I don't have to, then I won't.
I think that was a mistake that I made. It's like I quit my job too early. I like moved out to Colorado. I'd been painting for like a year and a half. And I was like, all right, I can either go to Italy, pay all this money to go to Italy and study with like visionary artists there, or I can keep my job. And I was like, I don't need this job.
Yeah.
and I left, and it was great. I'm glad that I did it, but it also put me through like kind of a lot of stress after that.
I would encourage any new artist to keep their day job until they're really, really like solid and consistently making money off of their art to the point where they know they could support themselves.
And that brings up the business thing again. Like, unless you have studied business either from a school or on the internet, like, maybe like give that like as much thought as you do like
definitely
what you're working on.
I don't think it's stress enough how important it is to young artists, especially if, like in my illustration school, we had one business class, just one out of the 4 years of all the classes that I took.
Yeah.
And that's not enough. I think you need at least 50%.
Yeah. And I mean, specifically for the arts too, because there are so many little avenues that you can take, like licensing your work, or like, you know, how to be a good salesperson, like in person, you know, or like
Yeah.
connecting with people, you know.
Yeah, and it's not natural for a lot of artists. A lot of artists are weird and just like socially awkward, and
Yeah.
I'm totally all those things. So
Right. I
Yeah.
think like festivals sort of beat that out of you in a way, you know.
That's what I love so much about festivals, because I'm actually like a pretty shy person.
Uh-huh.
So I have a hard time going up to people and just talking. So
Right.
what I liked about painting at festivals is like people would come to me,
Right.
you know, because I had this thing that was
You're
attractive.
under a bright
and,
light.
you know, it's like somebody wanted to come up to me and look at, you know, then we had something to talk about too. You know,
Yeah.
I wasn't just like grasping at straws trying to come up with something to say.
Yeah.
So
It's a great icebreaker, and
yeah,
you actually meet a lot of cool people that way.
so many. I met
Yeah.
so many of my friends through it. It's such a great thing. Yeah, I can't.
When was the last time you went to one?
A festival?
Yeah.
I went to one last week.
Oh, nice.
That's
Sweet.
part of the reason why I came out here. I
Oh,
went
sweet.
to a little like family style dancing camp out, and it was so lovely because this is the first one I've experienced in probably a good 2.5 or so years. You know, it's like the first festival after this whole pandemic that I was able to go to, and it was small enough that it just felt really chill, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was really sweet.
How'd you do with the pandemic?
I actually did really well because I'm an introvert, and I love solitude, and I can be a hermit, and I felt so relieved at the lack of social pressure that I had. Like I had the excuse to stay at home and just introvert hard.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I loved it. I soaked up every single second of it. And like, as soon as things started opening up again, I have all these friends coming at me like, come over, we miss you. And I'm just like, oh gosh, okay.
Yeah.
It feels good to get out again, but, and have balance, but it was just so relieving to just be able to stay in for like a very extended period of time with no guilt.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
And so I took the opportunity to go to school, basically.
Oh, nice.
I kind of just relearned some basics, some art basics, just composition studies, color theory, because, you know, I learned all that in art school, but it's always good to get a refresher.
Yeah.
And I took some oil painting classes and palette knife painting classes all online, which was so cool. Like I was so excited that I could take workshops from all these artists, and I was taking dance workshops too, just from people all over the world. Like I suddenly had access to all this information and education. And that's where I also took a 3-month-long online business course for artists. And
nice.
so it's just
Talk
kind of
about
push
that.
a reset button for me.
Yeah. So what was the business class for artists about? Who'd you take it with? And
So her name is Mary Gilkerson. She's a older Southern landscape painter. And, you know, there's a bunch of different artists that teach online business for artists. But I liked her because she's really down to earth. You know, she's Southern, and like she's just like chill and like really relatable, and just like I love her whole vibe and her whole approach, because her approach is all about like little baby steps every day, which is like so good for me, because one reason why I stopped really getting that deep into the festival world and painting at parties is because I burnt out hard.
yeah.
I burnt out hard. I was doing festivals every weekend, and it's a lot of energy. And I just
Sure is.
got way too ahead of myself and realized that I'm actually a much slower paced person. And I actually stopped painting for a long time because I just got so burnt out. I mean, I could go pretty deep into what happened there.
What year was this? So you started in 2009 painting at festivals, and then when did you kind of stop for a little bit?
I think it was around 2014.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of things that happened, but I started feeling disconnected from the art family a bit. Started feeling a little, and I don't know how much of this is probably a lot of it in my head, but because I basically like started getting really like heavy in my head and started having kind of like this anxiety, like identity crisis type thing, because I stopped feeling connected to the family. I stopped feeling connected to my art. And so I had, I felt like a fake, because people would come up to me and I wasn't connected to my art. So, I'd have to pretend that everything was cool, and it wasn't. And, there is this thing called imposter syndrome, and I didn't know what it was back then. And I wish I did, because I felt so alone. I felt like the only one going through this. And apparently a lot of artists go through it. And it's basically like, if you're out of alignment with what you're doing, you feel like a fraud. And even if you're really successful and everybody looks up to you, it's like, you still feel like a fraud. It's like, no, it's all bullshit. It's all fake. Like, none of that's real. And so, I had a really rough time and stopped painting for, a good 3 years.
Really? Just all together?
All together. Like, I would have anxiety. I would have panic attacks. I'd pull out a paintbrush and, like, couldn't paint.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you solve that? Or how did you move past that?
I spent a lot of time, like, chilling hard. Like, moving slow. Learning how to take care of myself, like learning how self-care, lots of therapy, went to therapy for the first time, started exercising for the first time. I never exercised. So I got into movement, which really helped me. Gardening.
Oh, sweet.
So like working with the earth, which I've always been into, but I did it a lot more then. And like started learning more about myself and how I work, how I operate.
Yeah.
And instead of like looking at other people and thinking, oh, they go balls to the wall, they go hard, so I should go hard, and following them. And so I, taking a step back and realizing like, no, I'm a little more like slow pace, like baby steps, just like it's a marathon, not a race, right?
Yeah.
And that's what my business teacher was always pushing, which I love.
Yeah.
So,
you said her name is Mary Gilkerson?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What were kind of like, you don't obviously have to go through the whole course with us, but like, what were some of the like key points, if you can remember?
There's so much.
Yeah. Just pick anyone.
Definitely the marathon, not a race thing. Like little doing small. So what she's also, the first thing she teaches is about your routine and you're like, getting in the mindset. Like that's first and foremost. And then like building a routine based on the things that you love and rewarding yourself for accomplishments instead of beating yourself up for non-accomplishments.
Yeah.
Which is like,
that's awesome.
I was doing that a lot, beating myself up for not accomplishing. And it's like, why would you do that? I don't know. But
that's such good advice. I think artists get really, first of all, like with imposter syndrome, when you look at someone else and you're like trying to judge how you behave based on other people's behaviors, like it's always like a endless bottomless pit of like, oh, it could be better. Why am I not like so-and-so,
You can't compare yourself to other people, and I do it all the time, and that's like my biggest vice is that. And it's just, you can't, because everybody's so different. Everybody has a different path. Everybody has a different brain and process and like life experience, and it's just, you just can't compare. You don't compare, get inspired, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, and like, I mean, to point out the obvious, social media is like contributing to that a lot. It's like so easy to compare yourself to literally anyone on the planet.
Yeah, there's a lot of unhealthy things about social media, but it's also great that you can get yourself out there to so many people. So it's like,
it's such a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
it's like I'll go ahead and say I wouldn't have an art career without it, but it's also like it can just suck you in. And I had to delete Facebook off my phone recently, which because I never like post from my phone onto Facebook, you know? Mm-hmm. It's always just like scroll. What's this person saying?
Yeah.
What's this person mad about?
Yeah.
Who's joking about this? You know, and it just like goes on. And, you know, maybe we shouldn't be able to read everyone's thoughts at any time, all the time, you know?
Maybe there should be just a set time, like, okay, now you can do it, but you know, there are like things you can do to discipline yourself. But I've been a social media addict since I was like 12 years old. Like, because my dad he was really into gadgets, and he always had like the latest computers and
nice.
cameras and video cameras. And so I was on the internet when I was, you know, I'm 38 right now, and I was on the internet when I was 12. Like when it first
like chat rooms
came out,
and
like
stuff.
Usenet groups and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah,
you know, I was
yeah.
trading bootlegs on Usenet groups.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And
OG
then, you know,
status
yeah.
right there.
So I've been on there forever, and like was on chat rooms and you know, live journal and all that. And you know, before it was cool and everybody did it, it was kind of nerdy thing to do, and you didn't want to tell anyone that you were online, you know, because it was like that meant you were a nerd.
Right. I forget where we were at, but we were talking about business. Mm-hmm. What are some other things? So you're taking a mindset every day, right?
Yeah. So, you know, having a routine, and it's like you arrange your routine based on how you know you operate throughout the day. So if you find yourself mostly creative in the afternoon, that's where you set your creative time. If you're a creative night person, you do that at night.
Right.
And like set a chunk of time for marketing, you know, which is, you know, posting on Facebook and Instagram and your email list and like a blog or whatever it is that you're doing to get yourself out there. It's good to set a chunk of time every day to do that, even if it's just an hour.
Yeah.
If you get burnt out by that kind of stuff, you know, start small, start with just 20 minutes and then like work up to more. You know, I found that once I put my marketing hat on, it was hard to take it off. I'd end up like 5 hours in. I'm like, oh man, I spent way too much time on this. Yeah. So it's good to, you know, give yourself like a small amount of time.
Yeah.
And like for me, what worked for me, I'm a variety person. I need a lot of variety in my life. I have ADHD, like kind of crazy. So I get kind of antsy if I put too much focus on something for a long period of time. I don't even like doing long painting sessions. I operate best with like lots of different things throughout the day. So my ideal schedule is like wake up, drink coffee, chill. I'm a slow morning person, so I just like to read and drink coffee and then make breakfast and then spend a couple hours with marketing and then paint all afternoon because I like painting with the sunlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like I would, you know, wind down with some yoga or some exercise and then wind down, go to bed.
Nice.
So that's what works for me, but everybody's different, right? So
for sure,
you know, you arrange that however works best for you. If you want to stay up all night, you're a night owl, do it, you know.
Right, yeah. It's good to get into like a healthy rhythm.
Yeah. So that's the first step, and the next step is to have goals. And like I never had goals, you know, I never had like you know, and she talks about like, you know, what business people do. They have, you know, Q1, Q2, you set your whole year, you break it down into chunks and you make them realistic. Like you're not like, oh, I'm going to buy a house next year, you know, unless that's realistically in your trajectory, but like make them realistic. Like it's not like Q1, I'm going to build a new website and like start a new thing and just do all these things and expect to sell like, you know, $10,000 worth of art in 1 month. Like,
right.
It's like, you got to be realistic.
Yeah. And so did you do that? Did you follow those like quarterly goals? Is that a thing?
You know, I did it at first. I've been really bad at it. My ability to plan is not the best.
Yeah, same here.
I've noticed, you know, it's so much information and it takes a long time to, you know, integrate it. And I think a lot of other people who took the course feel that way and they're a little slow, but you know, it takes time to really like get it all running. So that's like, I definitely have to review.
Have you tried like, this has been helpful for me very like sporadically. I don't do it like regularly enough, but like just writing, just like either typing it out or writing it down, like even if it's like you said, like just goals. I think
Yeah.
I find that helpful to get like all the like half-assed plans in my head, like onto paper to
Yeah.
make them into full like goals or plans. I find really helpful.
That is another point that I learned is like if you're painting and something goes right, write it down. If something goes wrong, what did you learn from that?
Yeah,
And then incorporate that into the next thing. And so it's good to always do like a little review after each painting or after each sale, like what went right and what went wrong, and
Right.
then like put that into the next one. So it's just this constant learning curve.
Yeah, it's like note taking. I find there's something like having to do with memory and like using other parts of your body besides just your mind churning away. Like somehow like when you use your body to be like, here's this thought and this observation that I had, and you write it down, it becomes easier to remember in this way.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be super obvious, but like,
Well, yeah, I have a terrible memory, so it's always good to write things down. And I always think I can keep it in my head, but
Yeah, same.
I can't.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do need to do more journaling for sure.
Yeah. So one thing I want to talk to you about is you're making visionary art from around 2009 to 2014. And something that I've seen from you recently in the past, like 2.5 years, maybe, is you've been making these really beautiful, super chunky, like down to the like tonal value perfect, like landscape paintings. They're awesome. I love them.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so cool, and I love it. I love an artist who just is like, I don't want to do what I was doing before. I'm going to do something totally different. So what precipitated that change for you?
So, I was talking about that like 3-year long kind of like anxiety attack I had, where I just like questioned everything, like, existential crisis almost type
Sure.
of deal. And it was really intense. So, I had to like kind of claw my way out of that. And, the way I did it was through therapy. But I also, there were 2 people that moved into my house who started a book club. And the book club was for The Artist's Way. Have you heard of this book?
I feel like I've heard of it. I definitely have not read it though.
I'm spacing on the author. I should know this.
The Artist's Way.
Yeah, it's basically a 12-step program for creatives. So
Okay.
if you've like lost your creativity or like there's blocks, it's like an artist block, 12-step program.
Nice.
So we did this together. We met every week and did a different, chapter from the book. And that's where they, one of the things you get out of that is to write every day. 3 pages a day of just like garbage, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is.
Stream of consciousness, anything. You could write, I don't want to write this over and over again for 3 pages, and that counts. So, but it really helped me get back into the original creative spirit that got me when I was a child, because part of what goes on in that book is it reconnects you to your inner child. And like you ask your inner child, well, what do you want? What do you need? And like for me, what I needed was to just be free and inspired, right? And like I felt shackled to my old art. I felt pigeonholed, and I love it. I still love it, and I still want to make vision. I'm not going to never make visionary art again, but I want to do it when I'm feeling it and when I'm actually inspired, and I'm not like forcing these. Like I felt like every painting that I made had to be this epic, like idea that would change the course of humanity. I'm like, that's so much pressure.
Yeah, I've been there too. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to spend a year on this painting. And then it's like, doesn't really move the needle so much,
Yeah. And I was spending so much time on each painting that I was only making like 3 paintings a year.
Right.
And that's not enough, really.
No.
So I, at that time, I started looking at other artists, like normal artists, like traditional, painters. And I got so inspired by the artists that have the ability to be very loose and yet very realistic at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, that is just pure mastery. So I started following an artist named Costa Dvorsky,
Yeah.
right?
Big fan.
Yeah, he's amazing. And I actually took a workshop with him in Menorca off the
cool.
coast of Spain.
Oh, yeah.
So that was like my first introduction to oil painting in 12 years, something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was an oil painter. I didn't like it. And he got me to change my mind on that.
Hell yeah.
And then I also started to look at some modern impressionistic landscape painters. There's one artist named Erin Hansen.
Mm-hmm.
She is like the probably most popular modern impressionist today. She's incredible. And I just got so inspired seeing these landscapes, and then it made me want to go on road trips, and it made me want to get out in
There you
nature
go.
and just like, I'm like, I want to paint this because it'll, it's like this continuous feedback loop of like nature inspires me and it
Getting to the next
inspires the
spot.
art,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, I saw her work and I thought, okay, I want to do landscapes. I want to do this. I want to, so I just went, changed. And there's some other artists I follow. There's an artist, David Mensing, who I took palette knife painting class from. So that's how I started painting with palette knife.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that. Obviously, you don't have to give a seminar or get too technical, but what kind of different palette knives do you use? Because I know there are different brushes, and I obviously know there are different palette knives. I'm like, for me, they all just kind of mix the paint. Sometimes I'll use them to slap on some texture or whatever, but
Yeah. I don't know what they're called.
okay.
But,
Nice.
David, my teacher, he uses just one knife for everything.
Really?
And I don't like doing that. I have a hard time controlling it. Maybe it's because I haven't used it for long enough. I've only been doing this for about a year and a half. So the knife he uses, which is kind of like the average basic, like conular shaped knife, that's what I use to mix colors. It's really good for mixing. And my favorite knife is like a rectangular knife. It's got a square shape, and I use that to make a lot of my shapes
And marks on the canvas.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I get like really good solid linear strokes that I can describe mountains with. I can also do really cool geometric textures with it, geometric patterns, because it's really good for getting this like thick straight line. And also what's cool with that one is you can flick it and create these like really thick textural like plant life type strokes.
Nice.
Yeah, and there's also circular ones, so you can get a lot of different textures, and it's really fun.
Nice. Yeah. So are you doing these paintings from life, or are you using photo references? Are you traveling everywhere to do these?
Yeah, so I do use photo reference. I often will put the photo in Photoshop and maybe rearrange it a bit, crop it, exaggerate colors. Maybe I'll even paint on top of it in Photoshop and get it to the way I want it. And then I'll work from there because I like working in the studio. I do go on trips to take like massive photo shoots. I take a zillion pictures wherever I go, like way too many, and then I get overwhelmed at how many good ones I have, and I'm like, I can't paint all these.
Yeah.
But so I have a lot to work from. And I have tried painting on site, plein air painting. It's incredible. It's really hard. And I definitely want to practice more, but I haven't tried it that much. I've only tried a little bit, and it is a whole thing. It is. I mean, you could spend the rest of your life, trying to master that. It's so hard because the sun is constantly changing. Everything's changing in front of you, like every second, and you just gotta like paint from life, but also kind of paint from memory, and then like be really fast like mix all the colors really quick, and so. I'm actually excited to try plein air painting with my iPad, which I just got, which will be really fun. So
Nice.
we'll see where that goes.
I've also noticed that like you're still using like pretty much a full spectrum of color in most of your new landscapes, but that they're like you're mixing the color really well so that it's not like super saturated rainbow. It's still saturated, but it's got this more like realistic tone to it. Did you you said you took a color theory class.
Oh, yeah.
Is that going hand in hand with
Definitely.
with that?
Color theory is probably one of the most important things besides composition and values that I would say to study, and perspective.
Yeah.
And figure, I mean, all of it.
Yeah.
But color theory is huge because you can only do so much with just all saturated colors, and
Right.
what really makes the magic is learning how to like embed them within all the desaturation and all the muted and all the black and white. Just there's a whole art form to that, and I'm obsessed with color. That's like one of my main drives to paint is color, and I love the rainbow spectrum, and I use it all the time. It's like, when in doubt, use more rainbows is what I like to say. And so
Nice.
a lot of my visionary art was very, very spectral, and I still like to use that in my landscape art. And so I think that's like the bridge, is the color palette that I use. But I've started to incorporate some more traditional methods, like traditional landscape painting technique that's used is to start with an underpainting that's really bright as a warm tone, like red or pink, or orange, like golden, yellow, and orange, and do the whole value study and underpainting with these bright colors. Because what happens is when you paint on top of that and you leave a little bit of space between the brush strokes, it creates this vibration effect that is actually way more realistic looking. And that's what the Impressionists were doing when they were describing light. It's like when you have a whole bunch of colors all put together, it's more reflective of what light actually is, because it's a spectrum of rainbows that like gets reflected on all kinds of surfaces. And like light itself is just pure rainbow, It's like invisible, but it only shows itself on the surface of things, but to our eyes.
That's a good point. Like any object you look at, it's not just like one flat color or one even flat gradient. It's all these, like if you look close enough, even this black cloth, if you look like at the lip part of it, it's like you can kind of see, if you look hard enough, there's color in there.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's one thing that they do tend to teach in art school or just any kind of art education is how to really see, and it's like we just tend to focus on like what they call local color, which is you look at an apple and you're like, that's red. But if you really look at the apple, you're like, well, actually there's like all this blue in the shadow, and there's fades to green, and there's some purple over there, and like you really look at it and you see that it's full of color, and it just gives it life.
Yeah.
When you paint like that, and it takes away the flatness.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like language sort of flattens reality. And when you're painting, you're not really, sometimes you are, but like you're not using the language side of your brain or the language part of your brain so much. And you just observe. Yeah. And you're like, okay, I'll just try and paint what I see. And you just match up, like mix up as best you can, like the color for the thing that you're looking at, I guess.
Yeah. And what's so fun about art is that you can bend the rules, you can really exaggerate things and just like do whatever you want, basically.
Totally.
But I think it's always good to have this like backbone of like structure there,
It's like you got to know the rules to break them, right?
Yeah, that's what they all say, and it's true.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I just love your new work, and congratulations on like finding a new lane, I guess.
Thank you. I'm really happy to hear that, because it's very intimidating to change courses, especially if you're successful in one style of art, and it's like I just felt this deep need to change and do what I actually wanted to do, because it just doesn't work if you're making stuff that isn't really like you're not inspired by.
Did you have people ask you, like, were people disappointed at all, or?
I mean, nobody's come up to me and be like, Jessica, I'm really disappointed. Like,
That would be weird, but like,
I'm sure there are people that are like, oh, now she's doing landscapes. That's so boring, and then they just leave. But nobody's ever like told me that. But I've had a good number of people tell me that they do support the direction that I'm going in, and they're like, oh, I think you're like onto something, and I want to see what happens. And like, I'm really grateful for those people because it makes me feel like pretty solid in my decision. And it's like, because it's so experimental, I'm learning so much as I'm painting, which fuels the creative flow, right? And it just makes me have even more ideas, and I'm like, whoa, I could make a visionary piece about this with these ideas, and then then I can make like a landscape piece about this, and it just all fuels each other. The more experimental things get, the more open I am to the creative flow and spirit, and that makes me really excited to just keep painting and make more stuff. So,
well, hell yeah, you're crushing it. Keep it up.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you if you have like any other influences from different mediums.
Oh yeah,
like
definitely music for sure. 100%. I mean,
or what? What's your favorite?
My favorite,
top 5 right now. No. So
psytrance.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Psychedelic downtempo ambient, progressive rock and metal.
Nice.
Classic rock, like psychedelic rock. And I don't know, everything else that I like just kind of, I don't know if there's a favorite. I really like soul music. Sometimes I really love sappy girly music. Just like belting it out. I like a lot of kinds of music, but
I'm the same way. I'm like literally that guy who's like, no, I like everything except for the bad shit, like, and that comes across in any genre. Like, I don't think you can say like, X type of music is bad. Yeah. But like, there are certain things that you just might not vibe with.
Yeah. And I would never, exile an entire genre.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not
silly.
really that into pop, but there's some pop I'll listen to. Like, I can find golden nuggets in any genre.
That's right.
I think. And music definitely is a major, just huge influence in my art, but also just like my mental process of life. Like, it's very emotional. I feel very emotional connection, and I'm an emotional person, so I feel like music helps me kind of process my emotions, and dancing especially. And, before I got into electronic music, I was like a rocker, metalhead, punk. I was like moshing in the mosh pit and just like, thrusting my body at other people, thrusting their bodies at me. It's just like that. So it was like, it's like a release, it's like a way to get out pent up energy that I still love. I still consider myself like a metalhead rocker type. And
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to do that because I think painting it's so stationary that like if you're not getting some type of exercise or release, you will get like pent up emotions, and it can turn into like soreness in your body.
Oh yeah.
Or just like chronic things that you have to deal with.
Well, any kind of pent up emotion, especially if it's a negative emotion, it like embeds itself in your body. And that's what I love so much about like really aggressive music and just like kind of more darker music, is that it's like shadow work. It's like a way to get your all your little buggies out, and it's like I find a lot of metalheads to be some of the sweetest people because they have an outlet for it's so that's one reason why I've always been really attracted to like that kind of more aggressive form of music.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm also really, do you want to keep
going
into inspirations? Yeah. Gardening. Huge.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I mean, most of my art is based on nature. I've felt a really strong connection to nature ever since my first mushroom trip when I was a teenager. When you take your first mushroom trip and you have the whole realization that everything is connected, and
right.
And so I've always felt really, really deeply connected to nature, and especially plants. Like I'm kind of a fairy.
Mm-hmm.
I have so many plants. I'm like the crazy plant lady. So
That's awesome.
they fuel me so much. And
Are you gardening any like consumable plants like tomatoes and
yeah,
potatoes? Things
as
like
much as I can. My climate where I live, because it's so foggy, it doesn't get hot enough to grow a lot of things. So, but I can grow because it's mild. Like we don't get frost or snow,
that? Oh,
so I can grow all year round.
okay,
Mostly
cool.
greens. I grow a lot of greens, some tomatoes, and yeah, mostly greens.
Okay, nice, nice. Anything else? You listen to like books on tape or
I've never been much of an audio person.
yeah.
So
Do you read? Do you like read?
I read, but because I have a short attention span, I tend to be more of an article reader.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I like,
Sure.
taking in short snippets of things. I used to read a lot more, and I prefer nonfiction. But I haven't been, usually when I read, it's like I have this stupid habit of renting like 20 books from the library, and of course I can't read them all in the time frame that I have them.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Or you're just like, oh, I'm interested in this.
yeah.
Yeah.
So articles I think are better for me because I can digest more information in a shorter period of time. But yeah, audiobooks tend to put me to sleep. So,
Really?
yeah, it's like the voice is so calming.
I've been really into audiobooks lately.
What's your favorite?
Well, so I just listened to this one. What's it called? It's called Pretty Things, and it's kind of like it's like a thriller, like sort of like a heist thriller involving these two women, and it was just really great. It was like super. I was like, I definitely want to keep listening to this story to see what happens. Mm-hmm. It was actually recommended to me by Hannah Webb, who was my guest last week. Mm-hmm. So shout out Hannah if you're listening. But yeah, it's like the vibe of it is kind of as she described it. Even it's like a sort of like a middle-aged woman's reading on vacation. But I loved it. I thought it was so tight. And like the cool thing about it is I can have my phone. This is probably too much information and no one cares, but I can have my phone, kind of like on its phone stand right next to the painting. And then I'll have like instrumental music, like some side chill, like Blue Tech or something in the background. And so I'm like hearing the story, getting some music and painting. It helps me focus because like I tend to be like you were describing, like I think I have a bit of ADHD and like I'll get sucked into the phone or like, oh, I got to do this thing when it's really like not as important as like sitting down and doing the work, But I also love like Dune, sci-fi and fantasy. And, I listened to the Game of Thrones audiobook. I thought that was really great. Yeah, I don't know. I really like them.
I don't know. My brain doesn't seem to work very well with audio. Like because I start thinking and then I get lost in my thoughts and then I can't.
And you're like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah, so I have to like constantly go back and back. Same thing with reading. Like I think that's an ADD thing. It's like you read, but you're not actually digesting it. Sometimes I have to read the same thing like 10 times.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with audio. I think people who struggle with reading because of that thing, they say, oh, audio change everything. But I have the same problem with audio. I just like any time that I stop paying attention, it means I have to go back.
It almost helps me like not have too many thoughts for some reason because thoughts are just being blasted into your ear or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, I think we're probably coming close to the end. What I usually do at the end is ask you, what advice would you give either your younger self or a fresh artist now that you've lived as an artist for, 15, 20 years? Yeah.
I mean, I kind of said this earlier, but I think, finding people that you look up to and asking them if they would mentor you is probably a really good. I would definitely recommend that over going to school.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would also really, if you want to make this a career, I would focus really a lot on business. Like you're going to own a business. you have a business practice, so you need to learn these skills.
Yeah.
And also, like I would emphasize learning from master artists, and also like learning the foundations of art, like composition, value, color theory, perspective, figure drawing. It's also important to have that foundation, because then you have something to work from. You're not just like kind of aimlessly figuring it out. You have like a solid base to work from, and then you can really kind of catapult your style out from that.
Yeah. You can actually make more things.
Yeah.
You can have a full on vision. It's like some people run up against the roadblock of color or figure, but if you have those things down, like you can make a whole narrative painting.
Yeah.
Or a whole graphic novel if you wanted to.
Yeah. And what's great about the internet is there's so easy to go do this right now. You could go find artists you look up to, see if they have workshops, or ask them like if they teach, and you could, kind of cherry pick all the things that you like, that you want to learn, and just cater your own education to that. And I would have rather done it that way.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I feel you.
and then also find your tribe, like find a group of artists that you can kick it with and make art with and talk, and just like, so you're not so alone. A lot of artists are very like solitary, alone creatures, and sometimes they have a hard time getting out of their shell. And I think artists tend to relate to each other pretty well. So if you can find other artists nearby that you can befriend and like paint with, or whatever you're doing, if it's not painting, it's something else, and just like find people you can relate with and create a little collective together.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. So, okay, real quick before we sign off, tell people where they can find you on the internet.
So you can find me at jessicaperlstein.art.com, and the way you spell my last name is Perlstein. You can find me on Instagram at Jessica Perlstein. Facebook is Jessica Perlstein Art. So those are the main ways to find me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was really fun, and I'm glad we got to meet and do this.
Yeah, super grateful that you had me on here, and thank you very much.
Yep. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast. If you are interested in supporting the Patreon, that address is patreon.com/RTAF Podcast. And I want to thank all my patrons. You guys keep this engine running. I couldn't do it without you. Go over there and check out the tiers I have available. It includes video, guest suggestions, patron-only posts, and some merchandise. Thank you again for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. Do all those little things that help get Artsy AF into the consciousness of more and more people. Yeah.